UBN of Lebanon, Al Jadid of Lebanon, Al Mustaqilla, which is based in London, are broadcasting Al Jazeera for many of the Egyptians. Other channels are there. If you want to listen to it, use your remote control and tune to it. Nobody can force me in 2011 to watch whatever I don't want to watch.
They think that if you can just shut down the internet, if you can just shut down Al Jazeera or satellite television or shut down communication, basically, you can shut down anger. You cannot shut down people's anger at a dictator.
The clampdown on the network was one part of a wider campaign against the media.
Secret police, plainclothes police, obviously were targeting journalists.
BBC reporter Asad Sawi came on air in a blood-soaked shirt and spoke of the attacks against him. Journalists working with Al Arabiya, the New York Times, the Washington Post and Canada's Globe and Mail newspaper were arrested at least for a while. Local reporters were being pressured to toe the government line, and the deputy chief of Nile TV, Shahira Amin, publicly resigned, saying she couldn't be part of the propaganda effort anymore.
ويعلم الشعب الظروف العصيبة التي تحملت فيها المسؤولية.
If Mubarak's appearances on television were meant to calm Egyptians, his speechwriter didn't know it.
In a moment of complete chaos and virtual anarchy in the streets of downtown Cairo, here was the Egyptian president coming on air and not answering people's questions. I mean, their demands were unmet entirely. So it showed that there was almost a schizophrenia, a media schizophrenia.
If my President Mubarak, really loves and cares and respects his people, he would have spoken Tuesday, January the 25th. He would have made it very simple. I won't run again. I will do every single issue that the Egyptian people, the Egyptian youth have called for.
وعلى أرضه أموت وسيحكم التاريخ علي وعلى غيري.
What did he say? The only thing that he said that I will die on this land. I don't care where he dies. I'm caring that I want to save my people. It was a soap opera show orchestrated by the regime, by his presidency, by his cronies, by the people who are still supporting him in the military. It was a show.
But unlike events in Tunisia, this is a show still playing itself out on the streets of Egypt and on TV screens and social media the world over.
Here are our global village voices on the Egyptian protests, the media coverage, and the clampdown.
What we're seeing today in Egypt couldn't have happened 10 or 20 years ago. And the major difference today is the internet and new media, 24-hour TV stations as well. Today, anybody can be a reporter. Anybody can have access to a mass audience. The protesters in Egypt have really shown the power of social media in overcoming dictatorial regimes.
Despite attacks on the internet and journalism, Egyptians have figured out a way to communicate. And what I do think this crystallizes is that even under the most brutal and oppressive rule, people always manage a way to get the word out.
Other Arab leaders are looking at the situation, and if they're smart, they're understanding that their people want to be more than just subjects. They want to be citizens. And they see what it's like to be a citizen elsewhere in the world because they're so plugged in, they're wired, they have access to international broadcasting, internet, and they have a set of expectations about what their own government will do for them.
Time now for Listening Post News Bites, and we begin with a postscript to a story that we touched on last month coming out of Hungary. According to a leaked letter from the European Commission to the Hungarian government about new regulations on media in the country, the Vice President of the European Commission, Neelie Kroes, gave officials in Budapest 2 weeks to prove that the new law complies with EU standards. The legislation sparked protests in Hungary last month, and it lists fines as high as $1 million for coverage that's deemed imbalanced or immoral. There is also a concern that foreign media outlets operating in the country will be subjected to Hungarian media laws, which would contravene EU regulations. Ms. Kroes also expressed concern over the wording of the law and said that it was drafted in, quote, quite general terms, leaving large room for interpretation, unquote. While Hungary's Foreign Minister János Martonyi downplayed the EU's concerns and said that they could easily be overcome. Some media analysts have taken that as a sign that the Hungarian government is willing to make changes to the law in the face of global condemnation. You see, it does work sometimes. Whistleblowing website WikiLeaks seems to be getting a taste of its own medicine from the Norwegian daily Aftenposten. The paper has been releasing excerpts of the remaining leaked US diplomatic cables ahead of the publication dates agreed by WikiLeaks and its 5 print media collaborators. Ole Erik Almlid, Aftenposten's editor, refuses to reveal how the paper got hold of the cables, but he acknowledged that it took some work and they were obtained without WikiLeaks' consent. Aftenposten is not the only newspaper running afoul of WikiLeaks. 2 journalists from the UK's Guardian newspaper have published a book called WikiLeaks Inside Julian Assange's War on Secrecy. The Guardian, of course, is the newspaper credited with brokering the first deal for extensive collaboration between WikiLeaks and traditional mainstream media.
This is the first full-scale biography of Julian Assange.
Well, the book details the newspaper's dealings with Assange and details some of his quirky behavior, like disguising himself as an old woman because he feared he was being followed by US intelligence services. But what seems to have irked WikiLeaks the most is that the authors of the book definitively named Bradley Manning, that's the US soldier alleged to have leaked the classified US documents to WikiLeaks, as the source. And that's something Mr. Assange has repeatedly refused to do. The Guardian defended the move, saying that Mr. Manning had openly admitted to leaking the data to the website.
If the allegations against him are true, then he is the foremost prisoner of conscience in the United States.
Assange spoke about Manning last week when he appeared on the iconic American news program 60 Minutes, where he took a gamble in arguing WikiLeaks' case in the court of American public opinion. Video editors in TV news sometimes struggle to come up with appropriate pictures for their stories, but a Chinese network may have gone that bit too far. Take this news report, for instance. It aired on state-run Chinese Central Television, and according to the reporter, it showed a Chinese J-10 fighter plane in action, shooting down another aircraft during a practice exercise. But take a look at this shot. Anyone who knows their movies would see a distinct similarity between the explosion in the report and the mid-air explosion in the 1986 hit film Top Gun. A CCTV insider was quoted as saying that this was not the first time the network had used movie footage in one of its reports, and that it usually boiled down to either lazy editors or footage that was simply too good not to use. The media landscape in Israel is one of the most active and varied in the Middle East, but even there, aggressive journalism has its limits. Issues of national security are very sensitive, and Israeli journalists tread carefully when reporting on the military. But an organization called Breaking the Silence is living up to its name by literally breaking the media silence on the lives of Israeli soldiers in combat. They've gathered hundreds of testimonies from Israeli soldiers who have fought the country's wars and implemented the occupation of the West Bank. Many of the revelations have shocked the Israeli public, with allegations of abuse coming from inside the army for the first time. The Listening Post's Simon Ostrovsky now on the organization that's exposing the uncomfortable truths about the Israeli army and Israeli national security.
These are statements made by Israeli soldiers about their own service in the war on Gaza in 2009. For the last 6 years, a group of Israeli army veterans calling itself Breaking the Silence has been collecting testimonies from Israeli soldiers like these and handing them over to the media within Israel and abroad. It wants to shine a light on how Israel fights its wars and occupies the West Bank. Their efforts have been applauded by some, but the army they once took their orders from, and some in the Israeli media, call them dangerous radicals.
הארגון הזה, שמגבב גיבובים של עדויות אנונימיות, אי אפשר לבדוק את זה, הם יכולים לטעון מה שהם רוצים.
הטיעון הבסיסי הוא פה, שמדובר באנשים שהם פשוט לא מוסריים.
The entire world, including this group, including Al Jazeera, including The Guardian, including the BBC, are focusing on claims that are made.
So you're
by
saying
a
that
few
absolutely everyone
Israelis.
is...
They feel that we're doing what we're doing not out of love for our country and our society, but with some kind of evil.
The effect of the revelations brought forward by Breaking the Silence, which has interviewed over 700 Israeli soldiers, has been explosive in the international media, with a number of foreign outlets running front-page stories on many of the group's allegations of abuse.
Breaking the Silence has posted new photos depicting abuse.
But how much influence has their work had on outlets they most care about, the media in Israel?
Unfortunately, the effect is limited. It is not well